Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the high cost of free, a really thought-provoking idea from our source material that argues, when you get right down to it, nothing of value is ever really given away with no strings attached. So, to get our heads around this, let's start with a question that kind of challenges one of our deepest beliefs. A mother's love, we all think of it as the purest, most unconditional thing on earth. But is it truly free? Is there really zero expectation? Well, the source material we're looking at today makes a pretty bold claim. It says, no, even that love isn't entirely free. The argument is that there's always an underlying, maybe unspoken expectation. Could be for support in old age, or maybe just to carry on the family name. And that idea, it leads us right to the core concept for today, what the source calls the give and take policy. It's basically presented as this universal law, one that quietly runs the show in almost all of our interactions. So, what is this policy exactly? Well, you can see the definition on the slide, but in simple terms, it's the idea that real value only gets created when there's a two-way street. The source isn't saying we should all be cynical, not at all. It's more about recognizing a basic truth. For something to feel valuable, something else has to be given in return. And hey, this is not some new-fangled modern idea. The source connects this right back to the ancient barter systems. Back then, one hand gave grain, the other took gold. Today, one hand gives work, the other takes money. The principle? Exactly the same. It's just the currency that's changed. Okay, so that's the big idea. But how does this actually play out in our everyday lives? Let's move on and take a look at the workplace, where your perceived value can literally make or break your entire career. And to make this super clear, the source gives us this perfect little story, the tale of two singers. So first up, just imagine a singer with a phenomenal voice. I mean, they are genuinely incredibly talented. But they offer all of their performances for free. So, what's the result? According to the source, because there's no take, there's no cost to the audience, their gift, their give, is totally devalued. People don't seek them out, their talent gets ignored, and their perceived worth is basically zero. Okay, now let's think about the second singer. Maybe they're not as naturally gifted, but they have a brand, right? They were on a reality show, they have that name recognition, and most importantly, they charge a serious fee to perform. And this, right here, is the whole point. The simple act of charging money, of demanding something in return, creates this huge sense of perceived value. Suddenly, this singer is in high demand, and it's not because they're more talented, it's because their work has a price tag. The source has a pretty stark warning here. If you are always that person at work who does favors for free, who helps out without asking for anything, you don't build respect. You just become a resource, a tool that people use and then discard. All right, let's take a deep breath because now we're moving into the most personal and, the most controversial area where this philosophy gets applied, our romantic relationships. The argument here is that when acts of love and support within a marriage just become seen as an obligation, as something that's owed, that's free, their value can actually plummet. They stop being appreciated and just become expected. Now, just to be crystal clear, we are neutrally explaining the source's point of view here. And to illustrate it, the source makes this very direct comparison. It suggests that an affair is perceived as having high value precisely because its costs are so high. The time, the money, the gifts, the enormous risk. A spouse, on the other hand, can be seen as an obligation, so the perceived value might be lower because that cost isn't as obvious. So this brings us to the most important final point of this whole philosophy. This is not just about money. Not at all. The source is telling us to completely rethink what payment and exchange even mean. You see, payment can come in all kinds of currencies. It can be respect, or izzat, as the source calls it. It can be status, it can be recognition, or it can be as simple as someone's undivided time and attention. Demanding this payment is really just about setting boundaries and commanding respect for what you bring to the table. And that really is the ultimate takeaway from the source material. Your value, it isn't something that's just handed to you. It's something you have to define, you have to demand, and you have to enforce through this idea of reciprocity. Because if you do everything for free, you are literally teaching people that you are worth nothing. So this explainer leaves us with a final, really powerful question for you to think about. In your own life, in your work, in your relationships, what are you worth? And maybe even more important, who's deciding the price? Are you letting someone else do it, or are you defining it for yourself?